The Northtown News Magazine is brought to you in part by eVoter. eVoter is proud to be a sponsor of the Northtown News Magazine.
I'm Marty Levinson. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
Hi, I'm Marty Levinson, and welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
Hi, I'm Marty Levinson, and welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
Hi, I'm Marty Levinson, and welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Back to that lemon light city, sweet hopes.
Hey there, I am really Marty Levinson. Don't let anybody fool you. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine show with the greatest cameraman around, Sonny Hirsch, and your host, Avi Myers.
Thank you, Marty. Avi Myers, Northtown Neighborhood News Magazine, a presentation of Sonny Hirsch and myself. Dial us up on the World Wide Web at www.ntnm.org. All the shows are available on YouTube. Over 130,000 watched. Don't you people have anything better to do? We do appreciate your watching. We're real big on community policing. It's very important to talk and see your policeman directly. There's a lot of rumors, especially summertime, that go around on the street. Most of them really aren't very true, so if you want to really know what's happening in your neighborhood and meet the police that are actually patrolling your streets, go to caps24.org. Sonny Hirsch, my entire technical crew in his spare time, is the chairman of the 24th District Advisory Committee. You can find all the information for meetings in Rogers Park, West Ridge, West Rogers Park, whatever you want to call it, and part of Edgewater. For the rest of the city, call 311. We have a first-time guest on the show, a member of the State House, who's been there, well, I'll let her tell you exactly how many years, together with, as well as that's Sara Feigenholtz. Sara, how are you? Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
And we also have together with her Sheba Seif. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Good. And you are with Agudath, Israel of the Midwest. And what's your exact title?
Director of Legislative Affairs.
Director of Legislative Affairs. So actually, we're here because there was a very interesting bill concerning birth certificates.
Right.
Okay. Birth certificate. Well, I'll let you say the exact right name. And why don't you tell us about the bill and why it's important?
Well, it's a very historic bill for people who in Illinois who were adopted. Illinois has become the 10th state that will, and beginning on May 21st, allow adult adopted persons to get a copy of their original birth certificates, which is a right that was taken away years ago in the Illinois General Assembly, kind of in the dark of night, on a piece of legislation that was passed on an agreed bill list with no floor debate. And
that happens in Springfield?
Shocking, right? And I think that I'm an adult adopted person. I had a wonderful family, but I think that who raised me. But I think that if you look at how people search for families and put together family trees and people wanting to know the history of their families, we as adult adopted people have an extra branch. But this is really just a bill that restores a very basic human right. And it was finally passed after working on it for 14 years, and the governor signed it. And if you were born before January 1st, 1946, you can actually go online to the Illinois Department of Public Health and you can print out an application form, and all you have to do is fill it out, send it in with your $15, and you will get a copy of your original birth certificate, which you haven't been able to do for a long time. People born after 1946 have to wait a year. On November 16th, 2011, anyone born after 1946 can apply, but we have to wait a year to allow those birth parents who choose to maintain their anonymity to come forward, should they wish to remain anonymous, to file at the registry a non-disclosure statement, or a preference statement if they want their information released or not, or if they want to be contacted but through someone else. There's a lot of options and a lot of nuances. and it was just really a huge day for me when the governor signed the bill last week.
So, no, I know you've been working on it a long time. Now, when you say there's different options and nuances, like, for instance, if parents don't want their identity known, can they release their genetic stuff?
Yes.
So,
Well, they've actually, Avi, the Illinois Adoption Registry and Medical Information Exchange is a tool that it was a piece of legislation that became law in 1999 that I worked on, that where it's a passive mutual consent registry. So if you wanted to remain anonymous, you could have gone to the registry, deposited that information, and if you chose to have your identity divulged to the person who was coming to the registry looking for you, the child you gave up years ago, or the birth parent who the adoptee may have been looking for, you've always had the option to go to the registry. But in this particular situation, this is really more a bill about knowing who you are instead of an outreach or wanting a reunion. The fact is that most adopted persons really don't want don't have the desire for whatever reason to initially meet their birth family, but they do want that one particular document that has their given name on it, the document that has their truth on it. And the reason that the Agudath got involved, you're probably wondering,
yes,
why
as a
is
matter
Sara
of fact, that was going to be my
Feigenholtz
first question.
sitting here with the Agudath is, in the 14 years that I worked on this legislation, one of the things that I noted was that in the state of Israel, if you are 18 years old, you're able to get your birth certificate when you're 18 years old. And I always wondered how they arrived at that law. And of course, I'm sure that there were many religious opinions on it. And when I met Sheba and I had been working on another piece of legislation that was a very sensitive piece of legislation to the Jewish community. And I had asked her to help me do a little bit of research to see how, whether it was the rabbinical council there had arrived, how Israel had arrived at the law that created the ability for an 18-year-old adopted person to get their birth certificate, and she did. And maybe she wants to tell a little bit about what she found.
Please, Sheba, tell us.
Sure. In Israel, when an adopted person turns 18, they are entitled to get a copy of their original birth certificate. So while I was researching this for Sarah, I all of a sudden was brought into this whole experience of something which we have taken for granted, people who are not adopted, and that is just to get one's birth certificate. And that's something which adopted persons in Illinois have not been able to get for a very long time. And it's, to me, the most basic human need, or the most basic human concept, to know who you are and where you come from. And that's what we worked on with this bill.
And I think what we learned about Israel was that that was essentially the conclusion that the courts had come to in Israel, and why they felt that this was a right. Of course, in Jewish law, there's also a lot of discussion about Tay-Sachs disease, intermarriage, knowing that you're not, having a relationship with somebody who you may be a blood relative of. So I think that in halacha, in Jewish law, there's a great sensitivity to that. Just about the time that Sheba and I started working on this, there was this horrendous story in England of a brother and a sister.
Twins.
They were twins.
Yeah.
They were separated by adoption,
Yeah.
and ended up marrying later in life. And once they made the discovery, they had to, of course, get their marriage annulled. But it, as you can imagine, was a very painful, difficult situation.
Wow.
So, I think that there are, in Jewish law, there's a whole bunch of reasons why the Israeli government arrived at the conclusion that this was the right thing to do. Intermarriage, familial intermarriage being one of them, but also just the simple basic human right of knowing where you come from in the 5 books of Moses, one of them is completely dedicated to lineage and who begat who. And so I think that there's a true appreciation in the Jewish faith for this. So it really, the Agudath was extraordinarily helpful. Sheba was on the ground every day with me, and then some. And without her, I'm not sure this would have happened. She was just really extraordinary, which is why I wanted to acknowledge her, because the Agudath was unbelievable. So
I'm glad to see it, and I'm very pleased. And listen, the Agudath does a lot of good things, and some of my best friends are actually card-carrying members of the Agudath, including me. And I don't want to get my one particular friend in trouble because I espouse political stuff here. So shut up, Avi. I will. Okay. So
anyway, that of course is a tremendous accomplishment. We're actually the only state, the 6th state, to have done this legislatively. This may not seem to a lot of people like a big piece of legislation, but it's huge. It's huge. And there was a great celebration at the Thompson Center May 21st. There were adopted persons, people who were born in Illinois, who've since moved to other states, who actually flew in and drove in to bear witness to the signature of the governor on this legislation. And it was just a really remarkable day.
You know, actually, one of my best friends at the Academy, who's no longer alive, I'm not going to give his name, but I'll tell the story. He was adopted. He never really knew where he was from. He was very curious about the whole thing. When his father passed away and he went to the safe deposit box, it turned out, well, he came from a wealthier family. His father had arranged for the adoption, and he actually contacted his original birth parents, who actually did get married. At the time, they were in high school.
Got it.
And, they didn't want, they couldn't get married at the time. They had to give the kid away. So I'm not going to say everything was roses and wonderful with the fact that they met, but it did a lot for him to be able to know where he was from.
He got closure, and I think that, the interesting thing about adoption laws over the decades are that I believe that there was a time when birth parents really needed protection from society, because these were women mostly who
That's
were
true.
pregnant, and they were not married. I know that was certainly the case with my birth mother. And I think that the social work universe was trying to protect adopted children from the stigma of being an illegitimate child. And I think that although the adoptive parents, of course, may have had some infertility issues and what have you, and all of this was stigmatized at the time, and I think that although all 3 of these parties needed protection from the outer society, what the unintended consequence of some of the laws that we passed were that they were separated from each other, and I don't think that was ever really meant to be. I mean, I believe that there's a time that a family needs to form, but I will tell you that social work practice of today is a correction of adoptions of my time. That it's really just the opposite now, and this actually is finally a piece of legislation that is going to treat adoptive families like any other family, so that they have the same rights as any other family in Illinois. So that's really I think it's an issue of fairness, and I think it's a good thing.
No, I agree. When you mention infertile couples, you actually, in the case of my friend, and I know this to be true of several other families in the Jewish community also, after they adopted 1 or 2 children, for whatever reason, they somehow, were able to actually have their own.
Right.
So, I guess, from doing something wonderful like that, there's a lot of kids that really need adopting out there.
Oh, yeah. Well, adoption is a wonderful institution, and I've worked, I chair the Adoption Reform Committee, which is a special committee in the House. We've actually done some remarkable things around adoption, including making Illinois a commercial-free state when it comes to adoption. You must be a not-for-profit in order to have a child welfare license to work on adoption in Illinois. You cannot have a profit motive. I believe that we're the 2nd state to have done that, to have taken the profit motive out of that adoption, which I'm very proud of. I work with the same coalition of adoption advocates to pass that bill.
No, very nice. And 14 years you've been working on it.
Right. I've been in the legislature since 1995. right after my bat mitzvah.
I thought about a year prior.
So, yeah, it's been a great experience. I mean, I think that in the grand scheme of having opportunities to improve people's lives, even on these little things, you know, these little things really matter. I believe that the bill that the governor just signed, the birth certificate bill, is going to affect about 250,000 Illinois adoptees and birth families. So,
wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, we've been a very prolific state, and I think that, you know, we should all hold our head high that we have restored this right, and because it's very meaningful, especially to older people who really want to be able to, I mean, I tell you, I get calls from people all over the state about it, and I have for a decade. So I was somewhat driven not by my own motives, but by the needs of others in this state who really wanted to be able to hold that document in their hand before they died.
Well, you actually knew, didn't you? Did you know?
Did
I mean, you know who your original before?
Well, I mean, I think that everyone's case is different. You know, I think that there are some people who know nothing.
Yeah.
I, at a young age, I got information at a young age by accident, and I did search. I was in the minority of adoptees who actually searched. As I said earlier, most adoptees really, if they want to know, they would prefer not to. We're essentially, until this law was passed, we're essentially forcing people to do an outreach when all they really wanted was their birth certificate, but the only way they could get it is if they did an outreach. So, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do very much.
So, but the
I just had read something about you where apparently from what I had read, you knew that, so I just wanted to ask you.
Yeah, I did. No, I did. And I've had a really wonderful experience with learning more about my health history, which is really important.
Really important.
Very, very important.
We can't flesh on that too much because we're running out of time. I do want to thank Stephen Lanfear very much for helping arrange this.
Sure.
I want to thank State Representative Sara Feigenholtz. Which district number?
12.
12. And Sheba Seif, the Director of Legislation for Agudath, Israel of the Midwest. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for segment 2. Thank you.
Thank you.